It's never too late to buy a flagship headphone because prices has gone down, so these are not 400 bucks anymore, but they are much closer to 300 bucks, especially on discount, and you can find them with the links in the description below. We're still going to break down the plus and minuses of each headphones and see which one actually suits you best. Let's get started. Selamat pagi, good morning everyone, Kenneth here, and welcome to my first ever flagship headphone comparison video. Basically, thanks to my brothers, I got a few weeks in with these two headphones and I'll try to focus on the most important aspects. As always, everything said is my own honest opinion, and it would really help me out if you buy stuff through the affiliate links. Thank you so much for your support, and let's get started straight away with the most important aspect, the sound quality. So, starting from the Bose here, I'll actually go straight to my EQ recommendation, which is actually very simple. You know what? I'll take this off. It looks ridiculous. It's a 3-band EQ, and for most music, I put it on -3, 0, and +2 from bass to treble. Then if I feel like needing more bass, then it becomes +6, 0, and -3. Now, let's take the first EQ for a spin and listen to this lovely song, Toriame by Ekutalilas. The Bose puts the vocal more forward in a nicely separated soundstage. You can hear the different instruments in great detail, and I mean the whole thing just sounds lovely, from the thumpy bass to the sweet treble. It's got similar volume to the Sony, which is quite loud, like you can listen indoors below 50% max. But let's talk about the Sonys now, and I'll bring up my EQ recommendations right here. And the EQ goes more in depth here because we're getting 6 bands if we count the clear bass slider. My EQ here focuses on the mid to upper mid to boost vocal presence, and you can always adjust it further. For example, if you found this too bright, then you can adjust the treble, but I simply love how it sounds. In the same song, like the Bose, we can see the Sony bring significantly wider sound staging. Like, the distance between the vocal and the instruments are much more separated, and if I can describe shortly, the Sony sounds more balanced and less aggressive overall. Now, if you're in the market of ANC headphones, I don't think any of these headphones are going to disappoint, but one clear point goes to the Sony for the ability of creating and saving 2 custom EQs in the app. And that's enough. One for vocal, one for bass. And let's compare the bass now with Just Got Paid by Sigala. Now, the Sony is really capable of pumping an ear-shaking amount of bass with the clear bass slider maxed out. But I personally prefer it halfway, which is more than enough, and it still delivers all the details from guitar strums to the snare hits and the trumpets at the back. Very clear and very easily distinguished. Even the backing vocals are in different depth to the main vocal. But switching to the Bose now, there's no custom EQ preset here, so you have to change it manually every time, or honestly the bass boost EQ works as well. And in terms of pure bass output, even after maxing out the bass slider, the Bose just couldn't match the impact of the Sonys. And together with the closed up sound staging, it ultimately feels less satisfying. But still, the sub bass here is more concise and detailed, which is also a strength of its own. So it would be a good idea to visit a local store and actually try these headphones first with your phone and with your own songs to see which one suits you best. If you appreciate the video so far, I review a lot of cool tech and audio stuff, and I would be super glad to have you join the community, but we still got a lot to talk about, so let's continue with our next big aspect, starting with build quality and fit. Now, what I felt really matters here is first, the Bose has a hinge that folds flat and fold up, which makes the carrying case super thin and compact in comparison to the Sony that only folds flat, so it's much wider at the bottom. My brother broke his carrying case, so I'll put a picture up here, but it's not a complete win for the Bose yet, because while I totally love the new and sleek look of the QC Ultra, the metal hinge here is especially annoying because it's got so much resistance that you'll have to hold the headband like this and pull it out one by one. This is something that I don't have to do with any of Bose past headphones because it's super easy. You just put it on, click, 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 and you got the perfect fit. And here on the QC Ultra, if you do that, it feels like you're really pulling the headphones down and it feels like you're gonna break it. And you think the problem stopped there? No. After you finish wearing the headphone, you have to push them all the way in one by one again, and be very careful because your hand might get caught in the hinge here, which you'll get a nasty pinch. And maybe this is the reason why Sony opted for a single rectangular design instead because the resistance here is just enough. You can wear and pull down both ear cups at once. Heck, even adjust it back up with this extra bit that pointing out, which you cannot do with the Bose, by the way. You have to take it off, adjust it again, and put it back on. But the Sony is not perfect either. The only thing that worries me is the left side here has already lost its resistance. So it doesn't hold the position as well anymore now. My brother has been using it since launch, which is like about 2 years, but that's not too long, isn't it? Let me know if you have problems like this with your headphones as well. As far as fit is concerned, I think both of them does it pretty well. The clamping force is just enough. But one last thing I wanted to tell you is specifically with the Bose, the headphone jack here is not a standard 3.5mm, but rather a smaller 2.5mm variant. It's just a Bose thing, and the cable is included in the box. You can store it inside the case, but it's just an extra hassle should that cable break, and you cannot just use any random headphone jack, which you can with the Sony. And by the way, with the battery completely depleted, sad news is you cannot even use the Bose at all. And while the Sony can work, because there's no power to the DSP, the sound is going to depend largely on what drives the headphone, and your EQ is not gonna work either. So if you just plug it in directly to your phone or your laptop, it's gonna sound wildly off from the usual sound, making both effectively wireless and powered headphones only. But I mean, that's their intended use, right? Moving on to the next big aspect. Let's talk active noise cancellation, and starting with the Bose. Wow. This thing is amazing. It hands down blocks more noise than the Sony. The adaptive ANC takes about 5 seconds to kick in. That's where you feel the remaining noise gradually fades out. And it's very impressive that what remains is just inconsistent mid-range noise like the voice of music or people talking, while the bass and treble is almost completely gone. And all that is achieved without much compressed or drowned in water feeling. Furthermore, what's also important is the fit, as I feel like the bigger space inside the Bose ear cup here not only gives more room for your ear to breathe, but also lets you move your head a little bit while keeping a more consistent passive seal. Compared to the Sony that leaks a bit of high-pitched fan noise here, but I'll give Sony benefit of the doubt here because the ear pads has been replaced, although this should perform similarly to the stock ear pads, but it's changed. Now let's talk Sony ANC. Despite being lesser than the Bose, don't get me wrong, this is still very, very good. It blocks most rumbly noise across the entire frequency range. The adaptive noise cancelling also takes about 5 seconds to really kick in, but this is where the difference comes in. They just don't block as much noise in the mid-range. For example, with a cooker hood on, I can still easily hear the remaining 30% of the high-pitched whirring, while with the Bose, it feels like there's only 10% left, which easily fades into the background. Comparing transparency mode now, starting with the Bose again, this one is almost perfect. Not only it sounds natural, just maybe a bit on the bright side as it boosts the treble more than I'd like, but it really opens up the pressure, which is something cheaper transparency modes struggle. And on the other hand, the Sony also sounds very natural, but it doesn't feel as open. So there's that slightly closed off feeling, and the slight difference is enough to break the immersion. But practically with the Sony and its touch panel on the right ear cup here, you can always quickly put your palm on to automatically switch to transparency. Also, you got auto speech detection, so when you start talking, music automatically pauses, transparency turns on, and when you finish talking, everything comes back to normal. I honestly don't use this too often, but it's something the Bose doesn't have. And for a specific use case like a mute, this is a very handy feature to have. Speaking of touch panel, let's talk about controls. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of Sony's because turning up a few volume notches would require you to slide up multiple times, and pray that you didn't swipe slightly to the left or right side or you'll skip your music instead. Also, I found double tapping for play and pause feels like hitting your ear like book book, which is a little bit uncomfortable, so you have to control your force there. Let me know if you feel the same, but at least the touch sensitivity is good. They've had this for a few years now, so I don't think they'll change anytime soon. For the two buttons on the left ear cup here, the short one is for turning on off, pairing, or reads how much battery left, and the longer one is for switching ANC modes, and you can customize some actions with double or triple tap. Useful if you are a user of Spotify or whatever apps that Sony partnered with. But spending $300 and still hear a creaking noise when you press the buttons is not a good look. The Bose clicks very confidently and nicely. Let's check it out here. I hope you can hear that. This is the Bose. Now moving on to the Bose now, we have only two familiar buttons on the right ear cup. One for power and one for basic media control like play, pause, next previous song, and then you can hold it to switch between ANC modes. But then close to it is an additional touch volume slider, which can slide a bit or a lot depending on how much volume you want to change, all within a single movement, which is something you just cannot do with the Sony. In practice, it's still a bit tedious to get exactly the right volume. I'm still more of a buttons kind of guy, but then you can also tap and hold the slider as a shortcut to various things like starting Spotify, hear battery level, or start voice assistant. But you can also turn on a pretty fun feature called immersive audio. It has two modes. One is still, which mostly fixes the vocal in front of you, although it can still move the vocal if you look aside for too long, for example. But the motion mode moves the vocal in more real-time, tracks movements quite well, and the result is pretty impressive with voice moved up and outside of your face while instruments staying close behind and around you. Especially for live vocals or those recordings with echoes, the effect is so good, and you can do this with any song. It's a spatial audio algorithm which I usually dismiss because they are straight up bad, but not so much on the Bose. It's pretty impressive. Then again, I call it a fun feature because I still enjoy stereo more, and also the extra battery consumption is just massive. We'll talk about it in a bit. Now for the Sony side, unfortunately, I won't go into 360 reality audio here because I refuse to upload pictures of my ears to Sony and let them use it for their audio research purposes. It's written clearly in their terms of use, but a part of it is also the limited streaming sites that supports the format. Maybe the more widely used one is Amazon Music Unlimited, but then how many songs in there are actually made for the format? After all this trouble, the Sony should give the best spatial audio experience, right? They better be. But I'm sorry to say, I don't think I'll ever cross to that point where I prefer spatial audio than conventional stereo. Maybe one day, but what do you think? Okay, I really set out to make a quick video, but look at what I've done. If you appreciate it still, a thumbs up would really mean a lot to me. And yeah, let's go through some smaller things quickly now, starting with battery life. Now, the Sony XM5 is rated at 30 hours on AAC, and that's with ANC or transparency mode turned on, which I found to be the case during my few weeks of usage around 50% volume. It really lasts quite long. I also appreciate Sony because they put out a detailed runtime for when you're using other codecs or using it for calls. For example, LDAC cuts the playtime by a full 4 hours. Basically, the more features you turn on like speech detection or DSEE extreme upscaling, you're decreasing the battery by about 1 to 2 hours extra. Still, at 25 hours with all these features on is on par with the Bose. And that's enough for up to a week of use, especially if you don't use that extra features or even ANC. It can actually last up to 40 hours. I also appreciate that it supports real fast charging with 9V 2A USB PD charger, so 3 minutes into this gives you 3 hours of playtime, which is cool, and the headphone has wear detection and auto power off feature to help conserve battery too. But let's talk Bose now. They claim 24 hours of playtime with ANC or transparency on, but it's without a doubt on the lower side of the spectrum. What's more concerning is the immersive audio that reduces that number sharply to a mere 18 hours. And not to mention high-res codecs like aptX lossless that it supports will take another 2 hours off. These 20 hours-ish battery life is actually not a stranger to Bose. Their Plus headphones like NC700 or QC45, QC35 all last around 20 hours. So again, with autoplay and pause and auto turn off feature, you'll still be able to use it for a few days, like maybe 5 days. Funnily enough, cheaper headphones wins here with like 30, 40, 50 hours of battery life plus. Finally, connectivity is on par between the two here. The Bose has been updated to support multi-point connection. It couldn't do it at the start. Sony can do the same and they work great. Bluetooth signal is also amazing. I can put my phone on first floor and go to the second floor here without any sound cuts at all. And for high-res codecs, like I said, the Bose supports aptX lossless, which is quite amazing, but only supported on Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 or above, which includes the 8S Gen 3 as well. But aptX support in general is quite limited limited since Google and Samsung just didn't bother paying the license fee, which is where LDAC on the Sony wins because it's simply supported on most Android phones. When it works through aptX lossless or aptX adaptive by extension though, the Bose can automatically lower latency close to 100 millisecond on games, which is amazing. And since Bose doesn't have a dedicated gaming mode, it's a very welcome feature. Alright, last and just as importantly, we'll see the two microphones tested right now, and I really recommend you listen with a headphone or an earphone because on speakers the difference might not be as clear, but let's check it out now. Okay, so welcome everyone to the microphone test. We are now with the Sony WH-1000XM5. Just want to make sure I got that name right. But yeah, what do you think of the sound quality? I actually just reviewed the footage I recorded before and it sounded so good. You let me know what you think down in the comments below, and we're going to switch over to the Bose right now and we'll see how that performs. Okay, and here we are now, switch over to the Bose QC Ultra. What do you think of the sound quality? And by the way, one thing I forgot to mention with the Sony is you can switch between noise cancellation modes while using the microphone. Same thing with the Bose right here, which is something that cheaper headphones, even wireless earbuds cannot do. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the test. Let's move on to the iPhone microphone now so you have a good idea of what the noise is around here right now. Okay, so here we are now with the phone microphone and I look absolutely ridiculous right now. I cannot even look down. But yeah, this is what it sounds like in this outdoor situation right now. It's not super noisy and there's not like very strong wind around here, but I hope that gives you a good idea of what these will sound like. Anyway, that's pretty much it for the video. Thank you so much, and here are 2 more videos. If you want to go for a budget option, I'll put it right here and I'll let YouTube recommend you the second one. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Kenneth and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.